Good evening, board members of the Drenorian conglomerate. As you have all requested, I am here to present to you all a full history and capability assessment of the alien species known as the Marauders. Hopefully, with such a report, you will all be able to decide how to implement such a capable and aggressive species into your fighting forces. Additionally, I have also requested the aid of Mr. Trundon of the Bloodheart Mercenary Company, who has chosen to gift us with some of his valuable time to add his unique perspective to his presentation.
He paid me to be here.
Yes. Some money was used from the budget for his services, but I assure you it was money well spent. Anyway, I shall begin. The first encounter between the species that would eventually be known as the Marauders and humanity was over 2 centuries ago on the world of Gorin. Clandax Corporation headquarters, who had recently secured exploitation rights to the world, had ordered a small expeditionary team to assess the planet for potential colonization, a colonization that was not to be, for soon after landing on the world, the team broadcasted news to headquarters of a hostile primitive race. And then about 72 hours later, all reports from the expedition team suddenly ceased. Clandex headquarters immediately responded by sending a troop transport to the world with a complement of 5,000 Marines. The plan was to perform a full military strike, to recover equipment from the previous expedition, and establish a firm claim on the world. The commander of those Marines took no chances and went for a shock-and-awe campaign, a display of overwhelming firepower, to force the native population to comply with the world's new owners. A strategy that has worked for many corporations across GCPS space when dealing with the uncooperative alien species. Unfortunately for the commander, the Gorons were not your typical alien race. As would later be learned, Gorons were extremely violent and forceful by nature, a personality trait that had affected every aspect of their society. Although later archaeological digs on the world show moments of peace, and even rudimentary civilization, throughout numerous moments of the world's history, those moments were brief, as they were always shattered by hostility. Meaning that although the Gorons have perhaps been on their world longer than humanity have been on ours, their technology was barely above late medieval level. So when the Gorons saw these warriors from the stars, they didn't view them as gods from on high. They saw them as equals. Equals who just happened to have an advantage in the form of advanced weaponry. Weaponry that would look so much better in their hands. Soon, tides of Gorons assaulted the Marines' position, and had killed hundreds of soldiers before they could eventually be repelled. The Clandax troopers quickly fortified their position, and their commander ordered an orbital bombardment to prevent further losses. In preparation for this bombardment, those in space used the Marine shuttle's automatic retrieval systems to return them to the ship. A decision that proved a mistake, as the shuttles returning were not empty. The Gorons had wisely determined that if these strange metal vessels had brought these Sky Warriors down, perhaps they might bring the Gorons up, and many had climbed aboard in case such a thing occurred. As soon as the shuttles landed on the ship, the Gorons burst from hiding, decimating the ship's personnel, and leaving the ground forces on the world completely unsupported. In response, the Marines constructed makeshift forts to hold off the Gorons until help could arrive. A response that might have succeeded if the Gorons hadn't changed tactics. The natives quickly shifted from waves of bodies to guerrilla warfare, using their maneuverability and local knowledge to lure corporate Marines into close-quarter combat. Combat the Gorons excelled in, and once the Gorons laid their hands on the Marines' weapons, it was essentially over, as the Gorons not only quickly learned their use, but also effectively integrated them into their tactical plans. Only 5 days after landing on the world, 5,000 Marines armed with the most advanced weapons and armor available were wiped out by a species wielding crudely forged metal weapons. In response, Clandex headquarters immediately ordered the world firebombed, an order that was countermanded by then-General Julius Klimt. Where the corporate heads saw a threat to their profits, the general saw potential. It was true that these aliens were savages, but they were savages that quickly grasped military theory like no other race he had ever seen before, and also seemed to delight in violence, having no qualms about risking their lives if it meant a greater chance to inflict damage on an enemy. They also had a cohesive social hierarchy, and more importantly, A greed not dissimilar to that of humans. If he could use that greed to bring this species under his umbrella, the Clandax Corporation would have the single most important army in the galaxy. When the ship arrived on the world, General Klimt went down in a shuttle alone and unarmed. He spent 3 days down there, and when he returned, he looked exhausted, and his torn clothing had a smell that was considered, indescribable. Whatever trials he faced down there, it was enough to convince the Gorons of his sincerity, as he returned with the chieftains of the 3 strongest clans of the world to negotiate.
Going down with no weapons was a ballsy move, and I doubt those who found him were gentle. You've got to respect that.
After negotiations were done, hundreds of Gorons moved off planet and began basic training. They took to the training and especially the tools of war with ease, and with an extreme amount of enthusiasm. According to records, they had to be reminded several times that these were exercises, as they constantly used their weapons as clubs whenever they ran out of ammo.
Training or not, a fight isn't over until someone takes a beating.
And as the Gorons learned the ways of modern warfare, humanity learned much about the Gorons. It was learned that the Gorons weren't one race but many, several subspecies that, although of different builds and temperaments, all equally loved warfare. The most common subspecies was the Orc, and they are, for all intents and purposes, the perfect warriors.
You bet your ass we are.
The average Orc is around 2 meters tall, with upwards of 160 kilos of raw muscle. They are faster, stronger, and tougher than any human, and can shrug off wounds that would kill a GCPS Marine. They also have a leathery skin that averages around 3 centimeters in depth, which acts as natural armor against bladed weapons, and can even lower the kinetic energy of incoming low-caliber ammunition, not to mention that its green shading, evolved from the intense ultraviolet light from Goron's sun, give them some protection against radiation. Additionally, although you would think their tough skin would lessen pain from wounds, it's quite the opposite, as it has been determined that orcs have 50% more nerve endings than a human. If anything, they are overstimulated, and it is theorized to be one of the reasons for an orc's naked aggression.
I like to think we are just more, in touch with our feelings.
The second most common form of Goron was the Goblin, referred to as stunts by the orcs. Where orcs are solid and brutish, goblins are scrawny and somewhat gangly. They prefer to fight from the shadows, or behind several layers of armor, but that's not to say they won't fight on the front lines, especially if they have a clear advantage over their opponents. The third subspecies, and by far the largest at almost 3 meters in height, are the Hulks. Creatures so large, exobiologists are at a loss to explain why they exist on Goron in the first place. After their training was complete, the Gorons were sent on their first mission, the quelling of a minor rebellion in one of the Clandax corporate worlds. A rebellion that was not just subdued by the Gorons, but essentially eradicated. The subjugation was so swift and bloody that the corporation's human troops stopped calling these aliens Gorons, and started calling them Marauders, a name that has since stuck.
Of course it did. It's very catchy and great for marketing.
The scale of the brutality on the colony was impossible to keep a secret, and soon every corporation wanted their own force of Marauders under their control. And the Marauders, realizing that they were desired, soon started putting themselves on the negotiating table. That greed discovered by General Klimt, now working against his corporation, as the Marauders started selling themselves to the highest bidder. And soon enough, every corporation in the GCPS had their own Marauder force, a state of affairs that led to the quickest expansion in GCPS history. With the invention of the McKinley Drive several centuries ago, humanity had turned from a one-world power to a major galactic force, the propulsion system allowing our species to stretch its hand across the stars. And because of this, alien powers had begun to see the sudden rise and expansion of the human race as a threat to galactic stability. Although they had remained static for millennia, these civilizations began rapidly expanding their territory, perhaps planning to keep humanity contained. The introduction of the Marauders changed any such plans. Vast tracts of the galaxy were open and ready for exploitation, and every week new systems were brought under corporate control, especially since it became far easier to incorporate already inhabited worlds through force than negotiation. Soon every civilization came to fear humans and their brutal Marauder armies.
Funny you don't mention the dozens of single-planet civilizations and races the GCPS wiped out during this rapid expansion.
Claims that have no basis as there is no evidence of such abhorrent actions.
Of course there isn't.
Anyway, for over 2 centuries, the use of Marauders allowed for corporations to be ever richer, and trade relations with other races to always be in humanity's favor. As for how the Marauders felt about it,
We loved it. We had a constant stream of enemies to fight, and an unending supply of credits flowing our way. It was really the best of times.
good times that ended with the Mandrake Rebellion.
Maybe for humans, but for us Marauders it was a hell of a good time. Actually, let me handle this part.
Wait, what?
On an insignificant world without even a proper name, then CEO Gabriel Mandrake had one big ambition. He wanted to control a whole swath of territory for his corporation, and had hired tens of thousands of Marauders to make it happen. Now he didn't have the money to do this at the time, but thankfully, some patrons decided to send a nice flow of credits his way. For some favors, of course. Favors he was more than willing to pay, blinded by greed as he was. And things were going great, until Gabriel's patrons disappeared, and the money stopped flowing. And there is nothing a Marauder hates more than not getting paid. So why did that money stop flowing? My personal belief, which is right by the way, is that those who will become your Council of Seven, your current corporate overlords, wanted to tighten their grip on the GCPS. Sure, they were each already heads of the most powerful corporations, but total control probably sounded so much sweeter.
There is no evidence of this.
Shut up before I put my fist in you and use you like a puppet.
Sorry, shutting up now.
What would become your Council of Seven had developed a tool to make this dream a reality. The Enforcers, genetically modified warriors utterly loyal to them. Of course, in order to make these Enforcers the strongest things around, they needed to get rid of the current holders of that title, the Marauders. Perhaps they had planned to cause a small rebellion on the world, and use the Enforcers to wipe them out, showing the other corporations that Marauders couldn't be trusted, and use that fear to wean the smaller corporations off the use of their favorite mercenaries. A plan that might have worked if it wasn't for Chief Mahar of the Red Hand Mercenaries. Now we Orcs, we don't have things like religion or ancestor worship. We tend to just live day by day, looking for the next place to have a fight, and maybe having enough ambition to lead their own clan if they're so inclined. But every Orc that looked upon Mahar knew he was special, something about him that made other Orcs want to be him. He was almost as big as a Hulk, ensuring he could beat down any challenges that came his way. But not only that, he was a tactical genius. It was said he could turn tactics and strategy into poetry, leaving any Marauders under him in awe, as his plans unfolded perfectly. He also had ambition in his eyes. Maybe he wanted his own Marauder empire. Maybe something about the GCPS really pissed him off. Maybe he was just bored. Whatever the reason, he wanted to lay the GCPS low. And getting stiffed on our paycheck was the perfect rallying point to get every clan under his banner. Mahar led the Marauders on the world to victory over their former GCPS allies, and then quickly spread them across the entire Mandrake sector, causing its worlds to fall. Additionally, Marauders from sectors hundreds of light years away started joining in the fun, just hearing about the accomplishments of Mahar enough to make them turn on their former employers. Soon, most of the worlds in the 4th and 3rd spheres of expansion of the Galactic West were ransacked, and your undefended inner spheres were all that were left between Mahar and the core worlds. A desperate attempt to save your GCPS was made at the world surrounding the star known as Nihil Rex, one of the stars that had almost direct drive lane route to the inner sphere worlds, a fact that was known to Mahar, but also your Council of Seven. The Council knew it was a juicy target, and knew that most of the Marauders would be there to exploit that route, and when they came, a massive defensive battle was had, as a large contingent of GCPS troopers held the line hoping to hold the Marauders back. And as they also bravely held the line, they didn't know they were just sacrificial pawns, a temporary wall that would be up just long enough for the Council to make the system star go supernova. The supernova did the trick, as not only Mahar, but also 80% of the Marauders in the galaxy were wiped from existence, which was truly a sad thing. I doubt a mind like his will ever be seen again. On the other hand, if the enemy had to use a supernova to take you down, I can say Mahar probably died with a smile on his face, because that is one hell of a great way to go.
Right, well, the GCPS learned a valuable lesson that day. It learned that it is not indestructible. Our reliance on the Marauders had made us complacent, and any future fights must always be by human hands.
Can you really call enforcers human?
Anyway, that brings us to the Marauders of today. Although they nearly crippled the GCPS, and were now in a weakened state, the Council chose not to order the Marauders' extinction, for two specific reasons. The first is that the Marauder survivors seem to have no ill will towards the GCPS.
We shot our shot and lost. No use complaining about it.
The second reason is that they were too useful. Corporations always have a need for forces to do, for lack of a better term, their dirty work, employing entire clans to supplement their forces, or sending them to areas they wouldn't dare send their human troops, such as dead zones, worlds with a horrifying virus known as the Plague mutates and transforms any upon them, a virus that, for a yet unknown reason, Marauders are highly resistant to. As for Marauders not employed by a corporation, they tend to keep busy working as mercenaries, or in less patrolled areas of the galaxy, as pirates.
At least pirates are honest about what they do, unlike corporations.
With history out of the way, let us dive into the more relevant information you will need if you decide to employ a Marauder clan. Now, the Marauders aren't known for their technical expertise, but they do know a good gun when they see one, and there are always arms dealers willing to give them the tools of war they need for the right amount of credits. The most advanced weapons you would find in a Marauder army are those employing HEW, or High Energy Weaponry technology. These weapons are inspired by the Genling burst lasers carried by Enforcer Striders. However, unlike Enforcer weapons which use direct and controlled beams of energy through an artificially refined crystal, HEW technology relies on a combustion chamber filled with a pressurized hydrogen gas mixture to excite power emitters. This provides a high-energy laser that could potentially outstrip the most advanced GCPS weaponry at a far cheaper cost. The only downside being a much higher risk of the weapon backfiring, or blowing up on the user. To the Marauders, this is a small price to pay for a weapon capable of puncturing a tank. More common weaponry found amongst the Marauders are solid-shot rifles, which are generally far more durable than their laser counterparts used by GCPS Marines, and far easier to repair. It does require carrying extra kilos of ammunition, but such weight is unnoticed by the average Marauder. Now, despite being part of galactic civilization for centuries, Marauders still deploy a social system of tribal barbarism, with leadership determined by displays of strength in the form of physical combat. Although to us humans this infighting would be detrimental, to the Marauders, it's more of a form of non-verbal communication. They constantly test each other to see who is in charge, so that when the real fight starts, they know whose orders to follow. Furthermore, despite the brutal nature of these physical altercations, these tests of leadership are almost always non-lethal, as surprisingly, most Marauders will not outright kill each other, unless of course they are employed by rival employers.
Why kill each other when there are so many other things to kill in this galaxy?
The winner of these contests of strengths becomes the Marauder Warlord, a veteran orc who combines their species' natural aptitude for warfare with years of experience. They should never be underestimated, as many a warlord has outsmarted commanders, who consider themselves from a much more enlightened civilization. Commandos are the frontline troops of most orc armies, and although they may not seem as heavily armored as GCPS Marines, their natural toughness and readiness to fight more than makes up for it. Boomers are skilled, explosive experts that are highly sought after as mercenaries.
They also, as a rule, tend to be insane, so make sure to keep them away from anything you don't want blown up.
Some orcs are known to employ jump packs. These skyscraper jump pack teams are used primarily to leap from aircraft and free fall directly into combat. The Ripper is similar to the Strider used by the GCPS, although of much cruder construction. Crudeness that is far overcome by its ability to greatly enhance an orc's already prodigious strength, and supplement it with an array of deadly weapons. Although orcs have no skill at engineering, goblins are known to have some talent in what could politely be called junkyard manufacturing, cobbling together or outright stealing and modifying weapons of war. For example, from afar, a weapons team will unleash a barrage of missile launchers and beamers to soften up a fortified target. And once the target is breached, a gun Shrek will lay out suppressing fire, keeping the enemy's heads down long enough for their orc brethren to reach and overwhelm the enemy position. Grunt Boss what happens when you combine captured Peacekeeper armor with a goblin sense for self-preservation, using its will to live and ingenuity to craft a heavily armored walker able to keep its pilot alive as it lays waste to the enemy. And of course, I could not forget the Hulk, whose massive form is a deadly threat to honestly anything when it comes to close combat. And from afar, the large weapons they carry essentially make them walking tanks. And with that, the presentation is done. But before we end tonight, Mr. Truden wished to give you all a bit of advice to help you with any future negotiation with his or any Marauder clan.
Yeah, my advice is this. When you come to the negotiation table, don't insult us with a low price or worse. Think you can outsmart us. Put this into your human heads. We don't act the way we do because we're stupid. We act the way we do because we like it. So don't be stupid, or we'll give you a presentation of what we like to do.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video on the Marauders, the green-skinned mercenaries of the Warpath Universe. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and comment so that the YouTube gods know I exist and hopefully more people watch my videos. And if you're inclined and you have the cash, please consider sending a little money away to my Ko-fi or my Patreon account. The extra money gives me a chance to work on these stories I love. Links down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed these videos and see you next time.